Welcome to the Life is Relationships podcast, where we share biblical truths about marriage, parenting, and discipleship. The desire of CTCI is to see individuals and families restored in their relationship to the Father, and for them to be empowered to have thriving, godly relationships that impact the communities around them. Hey, welcome to today's episode, where we're going to be talking with Erica Wilson and Alicia Williams, and what we're going to be talking about is how social media is affecting us, what the news, how that's affecting us, and just what it's like to have all of that information being continually fed to us all the time. Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Hi, AJ.
There is a lot going on in the world today. There's, COVID is continuing. There's wars overseas. There's elections. There's legislation, so on and so forth. The list of things is never ending. And so much of it is continually thrown in front of us as we sit on our couch or lay in bed, scrolling on our phones. Why do you think that we are continually fed so much intense and triggering information all the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is an incredible abundance of information and what we see and hear today. And it just seems like it's getting more and more and more. When I was a little kid, I'd read the Bible, and I remember hearing something like, and in the end days, knowledge will increase. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. What does that even mean? But I think today we're seeing what in the world the scriptures had prophesied, all those years ago, is that this abundance of things to see and hear has grown astronomically. I mean, we're old enough to where, remember, Alicia, like when we were kids, at night when it got real late, you'd hear like the national anthem play on the TV, and then it would turn off. And then you just get those lines, the colors, because there just wasn't anything left. The programming for the day was over, and that was it. And you actually had to go to bed because there was just nothing to see and do. And then the VHS beta came out and VHSs, and you could watch a movie. But there was almost like an ending to the information. But as communications and media and all these things increase and become profitable, and there's more outlets and more ways, and everyone's trying to get their share of the market, these things have just exploded to where today on your cell phone, you could be taking in information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 hours a day, 8 days a week. You know what I'm saying? There's no end to the information. And so that being said, all of those outlets and all of those channels are all vying for your attention, right?
Yeah.
You only have so much of it, and they all want their share, right? And so I think my eyes were really open to the whole, when our staff watched that movie, The Social Dilemma, the documentary. Yeah. It really opened my eyes because I heard things like, Facebook's changing their algorithm. I was like, okay, you lost me at Facebook because I don't. What does that even mean? What's an algorithm? But I think I learned a lot in this documentary about algorithms because you realize that your attention is monetized, and they will do whatever it takes to keep you in the algorithm, to keep you looking, clicking, searching, because the longer you're in there, the more that translates to them for money, right? Money for advertising, it keep you on their channel, keep you connected to their channel. So all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, you see things that you've been searching for to buy now are all of a sudden showing on the side there, trying to get you to click on them. You watch a video and all of a sudden, up next, 20 more videos just like it. So they can string you along and keep your attention there. And then next thing you know, you've been sitting on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you've been on, scrolling for like 2 hours, and you don't even know where the time went,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that that documentary revealed, and I think it's obvious, you can see this play out in your own life, is that the more intense, the more triggering, the more like emotionally charging the information is, it's actually more engaging to you. Which means they keep you on longer, which means they have your attention longer, which means they can monetize that better. And so why not show you the things that are going to get you all riled up? Mm-hmm. But does that really consider the people in the audience and their emotional and spiritual and psychological state? No, it's not even on the radar, I don't think.
Yeah. And we lose our we lose our broader context because
Right.
it's a whole culture, a whole generation full of people being lobsters in the pot at the same time.
Ooh.
And if we lose touch with the human experience that has come in previous generations, that we lose our understanding and our broader context and our realization that this is a new way of living as humans. Like, we could become addicted to addictive things. We become accustomed to being constantly stimulated, constantly getting answers. We can just ask Siri any question, anytime. We can get anything we want anytime. And yeah, we're a big generation of guinea pigs in that way.
It's almost like, with all of this stuff, because they're wanting to keep you in, whether it's in any social media platform or any major news platform, because they want to keep the ratings up. They want to keep people engaged because that translates to money and all of that stuff. It's because of that, we're beginning to see the effects of that on society, on culture, on, everybody, but even especially young people today. What are some of the effects that we're starting to see of like just this continual flood of information on people's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health? Like, what's some of the stuff that y'all have seen within that area?
I would say for young women, certainly, I'm not even on Instagram, but I know that Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, the pressure to always present a attractive life that really looks, poster worthy, that looks like something professional, that looks like something gorgeous, attractive, sexy, and put together, not just your personal, appearance, but everything about your life. I mean, moms are feeling pressured to have a homeschool classroom or, this win-win situation where they work from home and they look like a pro and they just live a life of glamour doing it. There's an extreme pressure that young women feel on all sides, and it's not just their body image. It's you got to look put together.
Right.
And that filter that they have, constantly looking at the reality of their life through, well, it doesn't look like so-and-so.
Right. We have to have, it's such a curated life, and the things that we see are so curated. But when you see them, your brain, you're not honestly thinking that. This is totally curated. You're thinking, this is it. This is the standard.
This is real.
Okay, case in point. I found this old article, it's strawberry season. It's summer, right? I saw this article about now that it's strawberry season, there's all these recipes about strawberries. And this must have been years, before Pinterest, before those things. So it showed all these recipes, and these little strawberry cakes and strawberry muffins are just like slapped together, and they just look like good, but in like my grandma's way good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, this is delicious, and it looks like a hot mess. But then I thought, this recipe would never fly today unless this thing looked gorgeous and beautiful and had the macro, lens on it. No one would even make this. But everybody knows that grandma's strawberry shortcake flop thing bomb in a bowl is delicious. But no one would even eat that today. And if you made that, you wouldn't even think it's delicious because it didn't look awesome. And you'd feel like the worst grandma ever, right?
Right. And so, like, what y'all are talking about is there's so much of this comparison.
Yeah.
Like people are living their lives in comparison to others. And this is almost separate from like just all of the triggering stuff. But when we're talking about social media, people are spending their lives comparing themselves to others, which leads to unhappiness, general unwellness in terms of like there's an increase in anxiety and depression because people are they're looking at this and they think that they're never going to be able to measure up.
Right. And then think about the isolation that it causes, right? So when we were kids riding in the car with our families, we had to decide together what to listen to. I don't like that song. Oh, no, this is a song. We've heard this song a million times. But it did something for us relationally, right? You had to work things out. You had to be in this group dynamic where you had to find a way to live peaceably together because it wasn't so isolated, right?
Yeah.
Then came the Discman and the Walkman, right? So it's like, y'all do whatever you want. I'm going to listen to my MC Hammer tape. and you don't have to like it.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of isolation. And now each person that I know, I don't know what the statistics are on this, but every human I know personally, above the age of 15, 16, has their own device. That means that we can be in our own world, our own curated world, let me add, constructed, mediated world, being fed whatever we want to be fed, up to our, what we want to see, all at the same time. And we can't even tell you how many countless rooms we've been in where everyone in the room has a glowing little face and they're all sitting together looking down at their own phones in a completely different place, in a completely different world from one another, alone together. You know what I'm saying? And so the isolation, I think, plays a huge, it affects us very much, more than we even know.
Yeah.
It's like we run to be isolated. We use our phones as an escape, but that very same escape we seek also causes isolation. And then we're not relating as humans, like talking and stuff anymore. I interview so many people who want to come to our programs, young people, and it's like I'm reading what they're writing and I'm looking on their pages and I'm like, what a dynamic little individual, how funny, how witty, how blah, blah, blah. And I meet them in person and they literally don't even know how to be. They're like totally uncomfortable in their own skin and they don't even know how to talk to you. And I'm like, you're not the same person I saw on Instagram. And so it's almost like you're living a double life. There's your mediated, constructed life, curated life that you portray to others. And then there's the real life that you're not engaging in as much. So.
Yeah, we got to create disciplines to get back to the present. And I see it in my kids a lot because they'll ask for my phone. Hey, Mama, can I ask Siri a question? Can I ask Siri a question? And I'm always like, okay, weigh it out in the moment. Do we need to be present? I might just say, no, nothing wrong with Siri, but we're going to live this moment in the present, right here, and not disengage from it.
Yeah. When it comes to so much of the information that's being thrown at us all the time, what are some things that people can do that can help them discern the truth from just the noise of information that's out there? And I think, when I talk about that, there's a lot on social media that is, quote unquote news, and then there's the news outlets and that kind of stuff. But with all of the information that's being thrown at us about every cultural situation that's possibly going on in the world, how can people kind of weed through that stuff to find what is actually true in this situation and not just what is being fed to me?
That is a really, really tricky one in a lot of ways, AJ. There's layers and layers and layers and layers. And I would say for me, even as a middle schooler, I remember considering the people around me who said they were a Christian, and I would look at them and say, okay, if they're a believer in Jesus, there's going to be fruit. So let me look for the fruit. I remember even as a middle schooler, God brought that to me. Look for the fruit. A good tree is going to bear good fruit. And so I use that screen really a lot. If you're going to listen to someone and at the end of it, you're going to feel full of fear. That's a mouthful. Feel full of fear. If you're going to be overwhelmed, or on the other side of it, if you're going to fall into the trap of feeling big, tough, right, like the strong man, like I'm the right one. If you're getting puffed up and prideful, or if you're feeling fearful, like those are two huge red flags. What's the fruit? What's the fruit? And what's the fruit in me? Sometimes I can read something that, many people might say, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. And I've trained my heart in the Lord to go back to him and say, well, Lord, there's a possibility this thing is true. If it's true, what's the fruit in me? Right. What am I going to do with that? How am I going to let you be the shepherd of my soul, through deciding in this matter? And like I said, keep going back. Is there fruit? What's the fruit in me? Does it produce a humble heart, or does it produce fear or a prideful heart?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you you said about the screen that you look through. I think even the first step in this is realizing that you have to be intentional about the things that are coming into your mind, because our brains are wired in such a way that we receive information in a very, I want to say, passive way, right?
Right.
Your eyes, your ears, studies say 80% of what goes into your brain actually comes in through your eyes, of all the senses. I mean, there's touch and there's all these other things, but 80% of the information we get comes in through our eyes, and then another 10% comes in through our ears, actually. And the way our brains are wired is that we actually passively receive information, right? The things you see repetitively actually start becoming a reality, the facts, right? Our brains are wired to reject new information, but repeated information is more trustworthy. This is probably how God created us in the garden. All the information we received in our life, in our environment, is supposed to train us and teach us about, what's safe, what's not safe. Is this animal one I don't want to mess with? Is this food something you're supposed to be gaining information, and repetitive information is supposed to train you that something is right or not right, right? But if you lack any discernment and just receive, right? Passive thinking or passive viewing versus active viewing,
Right.
and you just receive the information, you will believe it's true without that block, without that active discernment saying, no, let me weigh this. And the things I see, let me actually hold them with an open hand.
Yeah.
And be open and willing to look at some other sides of information, and then now weigh the two. The problem is that our brains are also wired to receive information from sources that are familiar more than unfamiliar, right? That's why, your friends can tell you whatever and you believe them because they're your friends. Your brain recognizes them as a familiar source, and therefore you receive information better. So that was part of the scary thing, is that in these last couple of years, with all the false information, misinformation, disinformation, the biases of all of these forms of media on such an increase, is that sources that we normally regarded as true and trustworthy, now actually we're not. And so now we have to all go back to that drawing board and say, well, okay, well, what is true and trustworthy? Well, the scriptures are true and trustworthy. Let me start there. And understand the human biases that present all the information we have versus what biblical spirit-led thinking gets us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that discernment of Holy Spirit in what it is that we're reading and consuming. And just you said, it can be really valuable to go and look at other sides of information to get a bigger picture of stuff. And it reminded me there's a website called allsides.com that I'll try and I'll put a link for it in the show notes for this episode. But what it does, it actually kind of reveals, it shows the bias of every major news network, where they are, whether they're far right, far left, are they in the middle, and everywhere in between, as well as like the fact checkers for those outlets. It shows the bias of the fact checkers as well. And so that's just one quick plug of a resource that someone could look at if they're wanting to kind of dig into a couple things. And on that, what are one or two quick things from each of you that you would want to share with our listeners that would help them feel a little less overwhelmed with everything that's being thrown at them in social media and the news, and how they can be aware of what's happening without just completely unplugging from everything and feeling like they're in a cave?
I would say get used to quiet moments. The Lord for a reason said, "Be still and know that I'm God." So, get used to quiet. And you might have to be really intentional. You might have to say to your husband or your wife or your parent, hey, would you just hold me accountable? I want to be sure that I'm taking some time today to really still my soul, quiet my spirit, and not lose sight of the place that has to have in my life. Be still and know that he's God.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing you can do is realize that it is really up to you to control the flood of what comes into your brain.
That's good.
Infotainment,
Yeah.
it's an addiction. It is infotainment. I mean, nowadays you just want to know stuff because it's entertaining, right? That's why there's billions of dollars being made on those, what are those trashy magazines at the grocery store, tabloids, things like that, because information is entertainment. So be mindful, control the flood, and be mindful about what you're taking in. And then, weigh everything that you're seeing and hearing against what scriptures teach, because biblical truth really does have to inform everything that we see and we hear so that we can make the right, wise interpretation. We have to have our worldview rooted in what biblical truth is, what God says about a matter, and then weigh all the humanistic, opinions against that, because so much of what we're seeing and hearing through all of these outlets, really, it comes from the spirit of the age and not the spirit of the Lord. So growing in your understanding of who the Lord is, what his character is, being able to, like you're saying, Alicia, walk with him in the quiet places, because that's going to be that anchor that helps you navigate, hold steady when everything else in the ocean is, going every which way. So
That is awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing today. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and just talk through this stuff that is really, it can be overwhelming in today's world.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and we would love if you left us a review. For more information about CTCI and our upcoming programs, be sure to check out ctcilife.org. This podcast is a production of Christian Training Center International, and it is produced by AJ Selby and Seth Stradling.